Hello, everyone. Welcome to Soul Sessions.
Yes, welcome back to this series that we're doing on mindset.
Yes.
And in this episode, we're talking about faith.
Ooh, my favorite topic.
Your favorite dessert topping?
Well, my favorite song by George Michael. He said, you got to have faith.
That's right. You
Faith.
It life requires us to have some faith.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to explore this topic a little bit, tell you what perspective we're coming from, maybe give you some hints as to how to cultivate your own faith, and then what we put our money on as far as what we believe and why we believe that.
And this is really about faith in our vision when we are working with our mindset to navigate life. A lot of times people say, how do I know I have power in the world? And so these are great questions. I want to say what faith means as we move forward. It's a complete trust or confidence in someone or something. So a complete trust. It's not, I kind of have faith. It's a complete, absolute trust in something or someone. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So what is our approach to faith? We're not talking about religion here.
We're not. Not that there's anything wrong with religion. It's a very useful institution or institutions, I would say, around the world. They're great institutions that kind of promote a certain belief. In a deity or in a system, in a way of doing spirituality. But our approach is more philosophical because we want to know, well, what does science tell us about the world? And what does our own experience about the world tell us? And can we trust that? And we know at the end of the day, even if we have a religion or even if we're born into it or subscribe to a certain religion, we still have to find our own way of expressing that and living with that.
So what you're talking about is blind faith versus direct experience.
Very much so. It boils down to that. And at the end of the day, it's all direct experience. Real spirituality.
Real faith is the direct comes from direct experience.
Yes, because it has to be a living process. It can't be just, I believe, right? It's easy to believe in something, but without really understanding it or questioning it.
And, there's a lot of things people believe, but they don't have that critical thinking to question it and really try it out. And we're always saying to our students that don't just believe what we say, try this out, work it through, because that's really where the faith comes from. You can have blind faith in something or an idea or a system, even non-religious, even a personal development system. But if you don't have a direct experience of it, it's just sort of, it doesn't have a foundation. So as soon as things don't work out the way you want, or there's a little hiccup, there's nothing underneath it to keep you in that solid ground. And what we see in the industry is a lot of people digging shallow holes, looking for answers, but they don't have that underlying faith of what they really believe on that philosophical level of who they are and what's the nature of the world. And so they're looking for kind of glimpses of it, and it's fine to do that. But after a while, if you really want to have a rock solid experience of life, you have to go deep within yourself, and we're going to talk about that today.
I like that, rock solid. It
rock
sounds like
solid.
Rock star.
So Jung, they asked him about God, and because he really was the spiritual psychologist. He was kind of divergent from the regular tradition of the medical model of just looking at the symptoms and the science. He wanted to combine science and spirituality. And so late in his life, they famously asked him, do you believe in God? And he said, I don't believe, I know. And he said he regrets saying it because people misconstrue. but it doesn't mean he doesn't believe in God. He's saying, I know there's like from direct experience. So through my direct experience, I know. And that's really what builds strong faith, is you having a direct experience of something that is that unwavering, that you know, like in a deep level from experience, that's how life is and that's who you are. So how do we create that? How do we create this faith?
Right.
And this concept of certainty of who we are and how the world works. And a lot of times people want to have faith in like external objects or external goals. Like I'll have faith that one day I'm going to meet the love of my life, or have faith that I'm going to have a successful business, or have faith that I'm going to be healthy again. So we use this kind of concept of faith to change our external reality in life, our personal life.
Yeah, and for us, I mean, we have to ask the question, who is the one that is having faith? In other words, what is the mindset? Because this is a series on mindset. What is the mindset that is asking those questions? And that makes a lot of difference, because if we're coming from the ego persona, and we can think of the ego persona as this complex that is our internal mind, our internal voice, right? That little narrative voice that's going on in our head. That's the ego. And the external, the stuff that we put out there, the way we interface with the world, that's the persona. If we're coming from that perspective and we're saying, I believe in myself, or I believe in life or the universe, or my vision, I believe in my vision. That vision is arising from the ego, or is very much a part of it, let's say. It's a part of my persona, what I perceive myself to be and what I project myself to be in the future.
So when people go and they set goals and they do it from ego, and then they reach those goals, then the ego takes credit for the goal, and then it just becomes this inflated ego. But then there's really no real satisfaction, because that goal out there, or that external thing, a person or something, defines you and gives you that. It's almost like you can't have it without the external. And so it's very, it's not at full power, because most of your power is going into those things you want.
Absolutely. The implications of, let's say, setting your goals and setting your vision and asking, what do I believe in, from the ego persona, always leads to this dissatisfaction, to what in Buddhism is called, or in Buddhism philosophy, not the religion, but in Buddhist philosophy, what is called suffering, because that dissatisfaction is the beginning, it's the germ of suffering, it's the seed of suffering. It leads us to kind of chasing our own tails and always looking for the next thing. Like, what is next? Once I acquire this vision, once I have what I set out to get, what's next then? And it just keeps going and going. But there's an underlying dissatisfaction underneath all that. And that comes not from the external, but from our own mindset that we are identifying as persona ego, that we think we are the persona ego instead of exploring deeper. So then the question arises, well, okay, how do we get at what is deeper? And that's where the approach to the disbelief or the dissatisfaction comes.
Yeah, so we, instead of trying to build up, like, I want to believe, we have a natural like it's in us already. The faith is like, we're built having faith. I mean, think about when we're born. We have faith that, something's going to take care of us when we come out of the womb. We have faith that in things that naturally I'm going to be fed every day, and all those things that we take for granted even. But or when someone picks us up, that they're not going to drop us. There's a lot of faith that we have in our life. Drinking water and food, it's not going to make us sick. Like, we have all these, it's natural for us. But that disbelief of it kind of sits on top of that. And so how do we access that natural emergence of faith that it's our natural basically state. It's really this examining why we disbelieve.
Yeah.
And the why we disbelieve is because we don't know who we are and we don't know the nature of the universe.
Yeah.
But when we're babies, we know, like there's kind of like this inborn in us that our people around us are going to take care of us. We're this helpless being. So where did that come from? We didn't have to cultivate it. It was natural. And then it kind of, when we get disappointed in life and things don't work out the way we want, it like chips and sits on top of that natural energy of just trusting that we're connected to everything and that we're part. There's nothing that we can, that can destroy us.
Yeah, and it's counterintuitive because most people think, well, if I want to cultivate faith, like I'm going to focus or force my mind to believe more.
I'm going to visualize my goal and I'm going to hold my vision there. And it's almost like the goal needs to be held because it's fragile. So there's that fear around it, that kind of white knuckling through that image.
Right. But wisdom begins by asking ourselves, who am I? That's self-inquiry. Mm-hmm. We do need the intention, of course. The intention is to free our mind or to move towards self-realization. But the first step is really that self-inquiry of, why am I asking for this? What is the purpose of having this goal,
having this
vision, and me needing to have faith in it? Mm-hmm. Needing to believe in it. Jung always talks about these dualities arising. In other words, you can't create something without creating its opposite. Mm-hmm. So when you desire faith, when you desire that focus on your goals,
when you're attached, right?
Yes, the opposite is going to arise.
Mm-hmm. You can't have faith without doubt.
Without doubt, yeah. Reminds me of Mother Teresa. They found somewhere something in her journals that was talking about doubt. Mm-hmm. She was doubting whether God really existed if she was experiencing or seeing all this suffering in the world.
And those are the right questions we should be asking ourselves, not you should just believe. You should just believe.
Right, and make ourselves wrong for having those doubts. Those doubts are essentially a major part of how we experience faith and how we cultivate it.
It's an invitation, basically, to explore ourselves.
Yes, and it is counterintuitive because we're used to thinking in linear form. That if I want something, I need to move directly towards that. Right? I want more faith. I want more purpose. I want more success. Let's move towards that. But the opposite, which is the doubt, the lack, the feeling that I can't do this, that's where the good stuff is. And Jung says, if you move towards that, if you open that up, if you inquire about that, that will give you the key to your faith, to your success. Because
truly, if you don't examine it, that disbelief will always be there. The doubt will always be there. It's just we kind of suppress it. And then, we all have that. Whether we have a solid belief in a religion, and our ego likes to make everything positive. So it's anything that's negative or things that aren't kind of going to impede on our goals, we want to push away. So we want to push away those emotions of doubt and fear so we can work. And in a way, it's good for our functioning to not be doubtful all the time. But if we resist the doubt and we push it away, we're almost making the doubt the enemy, and then the doubt becomes something we're running away from, and we're chasing faith to make ourselves feel better, like the pleasure of faith versus the pain of doubt. But we want to open it up and really ask ourselves, why do we doubt? Why do I doubt? Why do I not naturally have this faith.
Yeah, why do you doubt?
Well, I don't know. You always say that to me. One time I was like, I'm always like worried about it. I'm a worry. I get that from my family. My conditioning is to worry. And Rob said, I don't know why you doubt. You always get what you want. And I said, oh, that's so interesting. I start playing this game. And it's really interesting how when you let go of the doubt, or you're kind of working through it and you're seeing it, and you're just like, oh, okay, I'm going to play around with this this energy. It really is true. You start to see and have a direct experience of the doubt isn't real. But if we're pushing it away, we make it actually more real and we feed it. So that's why we go toward it. And it's counterintuitive because most people say, clear the doubt away and focus on the light. Yeah. But what we want to do is we want to open it up so we're not afraid of it anymore. And we were like, oh, I get this. This is the nature of my mind. The nature of my mind is to doubt and worry, but I'm not going to buy into it. And so you're not pushing it away, but you're not buying into it. And that's really how we work with it. So the self-inquiry is first listening to this voice. And you're asking it, why are you?
Well, I would say that it's listening to higher knowledge.
Oh, okay.
Right. Because we're asking, what is the nature of my mind and why do I want these things? In other words,
listening or reading?
Well, we're asking, what is the purpose? Mm-hmm. Like, what is my purpose in life? If you think about goals, the vision that we have for ourselves in the future, that's purpose, essentially. But if the purpose is arising from our ego, from our limited conceptual mind, it's always just about survival, always about me, about how I am going to be perceived by others. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's our personality. That's the way we exist in the world and in the social world. But it's not real spirituality because it's simply the appearance of it. And a lot of people make this mistake. They think if I appear spiritual to people, that's the best I can do, right? If I'm always peaceful, if I talk about religion or spiritual ideas, that makes me a spiritual person. But that's not spirituality because it's not including that doubt that we were talking about. Mother
Teresa. It's like seeing this faithful woman and the doubtful woman and seeing they're both part of you. Yes, so when you're having doubts, when you have anxiety or doubt over your vision, you know that you're seeing it from the perspective of the ego. And so that's where you start to ask yourself or learn or listen to higher knowledge about what is the nature, what is my true nature. That's really what we're trying to figure out. Yeah. I'm not the ego, so what is my true nature?
That's it.
So that's the question.
And we can only find that answer if we approach that question with the ego. In other words, we're affirming, yes, I am caught in limitation. I am caught in this kind of lack mentality or lack of faith or lack of vision. If we don't acknowledge that, then we're just glossing over it, right?
Or we push, like for me, I would just push it away, like, oh, I can't think negative. Yeah. And I got to like ignore these feelings and these fears and I got to like get rid of them. And what happens is that they become more powerful the more you suppress them into the unconscious. And there's a lot of techniques that are actually suppressing emotion than really freeing yourself from emotion. And we have to watch that if we're pushing something away, we're intimidated by anything, we are giving it power. And so if you're giving your doubt more power by trying to get rid of it, then actually inviting it in like the welcome friend and saying, come sit down and let's talk about this. And through the teasing and examining and understanding the higher knowledge, you start to open up to something different. So how do you listen to higher knowledge?
Yeah, so in the Gita, it says that there's 3 kinds of people that come to this kind of work, meaning to spiritual development, not religion. Again, we always want to be careful with that, but to spiritual awakening, right? And spiritual awakening can be done by the individual. We don't need external sources, except that it saves us a lot of time. right? But anyway, three kinds of people come to this spiritual spiritual awakening need. The first one are people that are in pain. Suffering itself forces us to ask the question, what the hell am I doing with my life? And why is this not working for me?
Yeah.
Right? Why am I so unhappy despite the fact that I have so much? Those kind of people are approaching this.
Or even if you don't have much and you're suffering from that idea, you perceive that you don't have what you need.
That's right. The suffering itself.
Something wronged you in some way.
The suffering itself prompts us to seek. The second kind of person, though, approaches this work from the perspective of, I want to know. I'm curious. I want to know. I know there's more to life than just gaining material success or being a good person. There must be more, something more beyond that.
Yeah, so it's that curiosity about our true nature.
Yes. And then the third kind of person is somebody who has always had that instinct in them that this life is meant for the self-realization, for self-realization.
What's different between those two?
That
they seem similar.
They seem similar, but the middle person, the one that is curious about finding something, they don't know what they're searching for yet.
They're just kind of questioning, like, what is life about? Like the midlife crisis people talk about. Like, what I don't know what it is and what I'm searching for, but it's that kind of the seeking knowledge, but you're not sure. And the other one knows the knowledge they're seeking.
Well, they know it's the self that they're seeking.
The self-realization.
Yeah, and the self in Western culture, I mean, we can interchange it with God. Meaning God realization, not the religious God, but the personal, spiritual, divine self.
The God within, or the
God within, which is what Jung called it. They asked him about the self, and he said it's the God within. That's the right way to think about it in translation. That you're seeking the divinity within you because you're part of this universe. Right.
So it's the nature of reality. We always talk about that. Do we live in a conscious universe or a material universe? And those questions. And then who am I? Am I that consciousness? And then so that higher level is like, I want to understand myself on that level. Like it'll alleviate suffering or help me find some answers, but you're really on that. I want to find God, the God within, and that higher knowledge versus just dealing with dissatisfaction or just curiosity.
That's right.
Almost like a bhakti yoga, that love of God, wanting to know and love God, or that soulful you.
Yeah, and in the Gita it says that the bhakti yoga approach is the most accessible to everyone because it simply requires us to seek that love of the spiritual. Like if you think there must be something in everyone's life that has shown them a little spark of divinity, right? In nature or in a dream or a vision or
a grandmother that was so loving, or
that's right,
someone
family.
in your life that gave you, or a birth of your own child. There's like a lot of times when I was a hypnotherapist, I'd say, what is the happiest moment of your life? I would ask that question. Most mothers would say, when I held my first child in my arms the first time, such an incredible amount of love. That's right. When I was around my grandmother, when I was a little girl, she always gave me that love. So we know what love is in that way.
Right. So the bhakti practice would simply be to think of that and then cultivate it, like expand it. Create the conditions for it to grow.
This reminds me of that George Harrison song, I Really Want to Know You. I really want to be with you.
That was before my time.
It was. My Sweet Lord.
Oh, yes.
And, he talked about Krishna and that I want to know you. I want to be with you. I want to find out more about you. That's that kind of devotional, but seeking that self-realization.
Yes.
So there's those levels. So you ask yourself, well, where am I in the level? Am I suffering? And I'm just trying to get out of suffering, which is always the best place to start. I mean, most of us have had suffering. That's where I started, is finding, my loneliness and going, there has to be a better way. And then I got curious, and now I'm at the stage where I just want to know what I'm made of. I fall in love with reading books about spirituality and these ancient texts and studying them and understanding consciousness and that. I'm not doing it in order to get something, and that's, I think, one of the biggest. It's tragedies in spiritual, the mass spiritual movements, is that a lot of people are using spiritual knowledge to get things, to get material things, and that's backwards. You're really just using your ego's just borrowing that ego is just borrowing those techniques and those things to get material things. And I mean, I guess that's what I started too. But then I think more people need to find those higher levels.
If you think about that principle, that's the base one.
That's the out of suffering,
right?
Okay.
Because you're saying, I lack something, right? I lack something, and something is going to make me happy. And if I pray, or if I meditate, or use these spiritual principles, I'm going to get those things. And
that's how I started. And then it got to this attachment and this self-judgment of when I didn't create something that I wanted, I'm doing something wrong. And it kind of, if you don't move to the next level, you too stay in that suffering. It temporarily gives you that hook. I feel like I'm making magic, and then, oh, wait, I didn't get this. So I'm feeling, pulled back a little bit. And so if you're there, then think about, well, let me get curious about the nature of my mind. And that's really what you're saying, is that self-inquiry. Who am I, and what is the nature of reality?
Absolutely.
And so when we think about it, the higher knowledge that in Eastern philosophy and Vedanta is that everything is consciousness, that it's a conscious universe, not a material. Like the matter arises out of consciousness. So the foundation or fundamental building blocks of everything that we see is consciousness, and that we are that consciousness.
Yeah.
And we're one with, so everything we see is us, which is such a hard thing, I think, for the Western person to realize, because it's so we're so materialistic, and we're so about attaining things and thinking of things very externalized, where the East is more internal, and self-realization is really the prize versus the material success. So how do we take our Western world and our culture, and how do we live in that unity? And I think Jung talked a lot about this in his book, The Secret of the Golden Flower, how East and West, 100 years ago, he was talking about how the Western mind takes these spiritual principles and tries to make it more materialistic, and how we need to, and so how do we do that, is that we have to study it. And we can't just read a book and say, oh, that makes sense, I get it, I believe in it. How do we have a direct experience of it?
Yes.
Of this knowledge of I am consciousness, I am one with everything. And that there's no need to fear. I have to have faith that it is myself.
It is a process, of course, and it is that
awakening,
self-realization. I mean, if you think about the word realization, it is that awakening to a deeper reality. That's what it means. It's not simply an intellectual understanding. It is living that experience. So it begins by hearing this higher knowledge, just like you guys are doing right now. You're hearing about this, and the second stage that you have to take it to is contemplation, meaning you have to ask these questions, like that self-inquiry that we were asking. What does this mean for me, and is it really true?
And contemplation is not just letting your ego just run. It's that awareness and watching yourself think about it.
Well, let's say the knowledge is instructing you on what is the mind. Because ultimately the Upanishads, which we consider, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, the ultimate source of knowledge, is saying you are not your mind. You have a mind, just like you have a body, but you are the witness of that mind.
Mm-hmm.
You are the consciousness, in essence, of that mind. And that's a very different perspective than the West, which considers the brain,
thought, the
mind,
cognitive functions.
kind of the origins of everything we do.
Your thoughts create your life.
Yeah. So what the higher knowledge is instructing you already is to understand what is it that I'm observing when I'm observing my thoughts and my emotions and my actions.
Yeah, I love that, because a lot of times people think, well, I got to change my thoughts and I change my life. And then they wrestle with this kind of flow of thought. And it's the easiest thing is to step back, watch the thoughts and say, I am not those thoughts. I'm seeing my mind. And then all of a sudden you start to have more power. But if you're kind of, it's like going into a rushing river and trying to save a drowning person, going, don't think that, don't think that. Other words, you could stand on the side and go, oh, that person's drowning, but that person's not real. Like, then all of a sudden it's panicking for no reason, because that person is a mirage. It's not as real and solid as I think.
Yeah.
So that's really that contemplation is, who am I?
That contemplation. And then finally you get to meditation. Mm-hmm. And so, when I first heard about meditation, I went home and sat down and tried to meditate, right? But of course that doesn't work. You have to prepare for it. But real meditation, especially in the Upanishads, is saying you're going to meditate now on that fundamental truth that you are the self. In other words, you're going to saturate your mind and your thoughts with that understanding, not just as an intellectual exercise, but as an experience, as a lived experience of that. So
you're basically turning your external power and light from the external and grasping at the external to moving inward and going, toward the center of who you are, versus scattering your attention and your consciousness out into the world trying to pull things in. You're going in and going right to the source of who you are. And once you find that and have that direct experience, then the other things will just kind of appear when you need them, and you're not as attached. And so let's go deeper. Let's talk about what you talk about, meta spirituality.
Yeah. One last thing on the meditation, though. Psychologically, what is happening is you're realizing that because your ego persona self is always changing and always in flux, that cannot be the real you. You're essentially falling back into that question of who is the one observing that reality, that experience. And that leads the meditator to that realization of the self. Yeah, so in the Upanishads, this is an interesting part, because people have asked, well, why do you guys believe so much in the Upanishads? Why do you teach it?
We don't believe, we know.
Yeah, because it's the only system that is not a religion. And here's the way we kind of make the distinction between religion and philosophy or higher knowledge. In religion, basically, you're buying into a dogma, meaning a set of beliefs and practices that are practiced in a certain way.
And there's rules and guidelines.
Right? Yeah, and you're not really free to question them or to kind of ask that question of, is this real or is this true, right? The main objective is for you to believe.
Which is why the whole Diary of St. Teresa was so appalling to all the Catholics. Like, oh, she didn't just have blind faith and believe it, but it was a healthy, conscious experience of, well, what is this about? What is this?
Yeah, and obviously I'm oversimplifying, because many religions are a good foundation for spiritual practices, right? Because they allow for prayer, for meditation, for self-inquiry, and all those things. So we're not putting religion down.
But we have to understand, like, are we having faith in a religion, or are we having faith in a higher knowledge, or the pure knowledge of?
Yes.
And what I love about the Upanishads is they've known for thousands of years. The scientists now studying quantum physics and reality, they're like, there really is no such thing as matter. We can't find it. We think it's there. And so these things that these ancient seers saw years and thousands of years ago, they had this insight. Where did that come from? It came from this pure higher knowledge that's within us. It's in all of us.
That's right. And I call it, or we call it, a meta spirituality because it's the only philosophy or higher knowledge that kind of criticizes its own self. Right? It's looking at its own literature and saying, you want to practice and get to the point where you don't need us anymore.
Yeah.
But you don't need these books. You won't need these books because you'll find it in yourself. Now, that is a radical, revolutionary idea. I've never seen it anywhere else where a literature, a scripture is telling you, practice so you can find it within yourself and then forget about us.
You don't need the books anymore.
Right.
You have the book inside of you. Yeah.
That to me is so liberating. It is the foundation of a real spiritual practice that has the capacity to free your mind completely. So that meta spirituality, that's one of the key points. The other one is that it says there are many ways to reach that truth.
Mm-hmm.
And here, that's very different than a religious dogma too. Most religions kind of lay out a path and they say you have to follow that path and do it this way. In the Upanishads, we see that it's saying there's many paths to finding this truth.
And even Krishna said, whatever path someone's on, encourage them because it's all leading to the self. So even if you're in suffering and you're trying to manifest something and doing a vision board, it's leading you to that because you know there's something else. You don't feel helpless. You're starting out that way. And whatever someone's doing, it's not bad. It's just we want to keep expanding their consciousness to see that there's also more to them and give them more power in the world.
Yeah.
But starting out that way, that's perfect. It's encourage them because they're seeking some sort of non-physical, non-material solution to their life.
Yeah.
And so one of the two practices that I think were really helpful for cultivating faith, dispelling doubt, is when we think about attachment, the reason why we get scared or we don't get the things we want, there's a question of, well, how come I don't manifest what I need? And it's this idea of attachment, that a lot of times we're attached, our ego's attached to getting certain things. We have that doubt that we can't have it. We don't already assume it's already there for us. And so we have to go in and move toward, again, the emotion of the attachment. And it's only until and non-attached doesn't mean we don't care. Attachment means that we're not afraid of not having it. So I always feel like if you're okay either way and you're just like, let's just be more playful about it, you tend to have less stress and tension around the things you're creating. But you also want to understand, is your ego desiring this? Or is this something coming from my higher self that and this only comes through experience. You can't say, well, when it's this way, it's that way. It's the ego. But I mean, a good rule of thumb for people that are just starting out in this kind of process is that if there's fear around it, the ego's involved. The ego has infiltrated this beautiful divine desire for things to express itself. And there's a saying that the divine wants to express itself through you. So when we have a desire or a vision, that's our truer self saying, let's create something. It's that creative mind that we have. And then the ego just jumps in and says, oh, who are you? Who do you think you are? You can't have that. Or if you have that, something bad's going to happen. And so that our conditioning and our patterns shut it down, this beautiful full self-expression. But the non-attachment is that trusting in the divine.
Yeah, the Upanishads set up this non-attachment as the primary superpower. To me, when you read the whole literature, both East and West, on what is the mind and what is spirituality, this stands out above all. Mm-hmm. Like, this is the greatest idea anyone had. I know in the West we used to think of Darwin's idea of evolution as the greatest idea. No, I think this is the greatest idea. The idea that you can act and continue to act in the world with non-attachment, which means you're not incurring any karma. Now, what that means psychologically is that you're not getting attached by the results of your actions.
And what it means, like, I'm good when this happens, or I'm doing it right when this happens, I'll be better when. And that idea of hope, that, a lot of people, I hope that things will work out. It's like, what is that hope about? It's actually it's building more attachment when you say, I hope something. Because you're saying, I hope one day everything's going to work out for me. And that hope can cultivate suffering.
Yeah, so what happens when we take actions with attachment is that the result of our actions, whatever outcome that action produces, has a conditioning effect on us. And this is well documented in psychology. Conditioning has a powerful behavioral effect on us where it determines what is the next behavior that we're going to emit. And so by the time we know it, we're conditioned by our environment, and we're not really making free choices. We're acting out of conditioning. It's molding and shaping and determining our behavior. That's basically the idea of karma in the Upanishads. But the greatest idea was you can act, and simply by renouncing the attachment to the results, you're completely free from the results of that action.
So it's not that you don't stop caring about it, like it's something you desire, but it's a very light non-attachment.
It has to do with the execution of the action. Because you can think...
Because if you do it out of love, regardless, like I'm going to feed 1 million people, spend money, and I don't need someone to say, you're a good person now, or I don't need that. Or if people appreciate it, or if the food gets to the person, you're saying, I'm doing this act, and I'm handing it over to the results.
Yeah, because
the act itself is fulfilling it.
Well, philosophically, we're all caught up in, again, those dualities that we spoke about in the beginning, that we think we're moving towards the good and we're moving away from the bad. But that duality is false. It's a false dichotomy. In other words, we don't really know what impact our behavior is going to have on the world. So you say, well, I'm going to do something good today. I'm going to intend to do something good. And that sounds great, right? Nobody questions it. They applaud you. But are you really doing good?
And then if someone says, what you did was not good, then you're like, oh, I failed. And then that's attachment.
We see it over and over. People create harm out of their best intentions. They want to do good. They want to go save people in the Amazons, but in doing that, they contaminate them with the germs from the outside, and a lot of people end up getting sick and dying. Those kind of things are, happen over and over.
There was one story where they saved a young boy. They saved him from death or something, and then what if he turned out to be the next Hitler? You don't know if your actions are good or bad ever, and you can't really see the long term, because there's so many things after you take that action. That result has like a ripple effect, and you can't control any of it. You can't control. Another thing too, I want to talk about attachment, because the comment was, I can attract and manifest with ease some things and some not. There's also an attachment to things being easy. Like I would examine, like, why do you need it to be easy? Like, what is that? Because I found that the things that didn't come to me easy were my greatest teachers. And so you want to have that openness to, it's not the thing out there that you want to manifest. You want to come from the place of, I want to have higher knowledge, like the desire for knowing myself, to have the higher knowledge. So if it's easy, you may miss out on something that could be really profound. I mean, I found the easy stuff is like, oh, good, that's nice. But the life of ease is not really why we're here. We're here to wrestle with the things that we struggle with, so we can have the higher knowledge. That should be the goal, not the objects that you want to create. And when you do that, then everything becomes simpler. but we are Western, so we want our goodies. We want the money and the love and the health and all those things. And then, culturally, it's hard to stay out of it no matter how spiritual you are. So we have to remember, like, what is the purpose? If our purpose is growth and self-realization, we always win, because it doesn't matter what that result is. It's not what I wanted. Okay, well, how can I use this for my higher knowledge? And you're always dedicating it to that, like Krishna said, dedicate it to me. Dedicate your actions toward me, toward the self.
Right, and psychologically what that means is that you're acting out of that realization that you are the self. Mm-hmm. In other words, that you're not really acquiring anything from the external, mm-hmm. because the external is an appearance of reality. In the ultimate reality, the absolute reality, everything is arising from the self, mm-hmm. and everything is the self. So there's nothing really to acquire. Mm-hmm. So often people here ask this question, then why act at all? Right? If
it doesn't matter, right?
Not that it doesn't matter, but if let's say if we're
not acting for the result.
Yeah, if we're not acting for the result, if we're not out to get the goodies, like you said, why act at all? Mm-hmm. It simply means that we're free from the conditioning effect of our actions. So mm-hmm. we continue to act, and we want to act, but we want to do it in a liberated way.
I just got that at another level, just hearing you say that. We're not free. We're free of the conditioning effect. Because if you get things that you want, and then you're like, ooh, I'm good. And then when you don't, you're bad. And then you're still caught up, even if it's a positive result.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so another question I think is really important. This question of, she said, you said the Upanishads, you don't need us anymore. Does that apply to us too? Am I always going to need coaching? Mm-hmm. Well, here's the thing. You may find another coach that knows more than us, or I don't know if you could. Just kidding. But, as we evolve, you're going to need, as you evolve, you have to seek out someone who knows just a little bit more or has a little bit more direct experience, so they can keep pulling you forward. There's like the Upanishads always say, you have like a guru. There's like that ancient tradition of having that guru to help you see what you can't see. But the words itself, once you have the foundation of the knowledge, now it's about having that direct experience. So coaching is really not about getting knowledge. Coaching is about helping you integrate more of that knowledge. And someone who knows more, has more experience integrating that knowledge, is going to be beneficial for you, because you trying to figure it out on your own, your ego is going to be coaching you. So definitely you may evolve and have other coaches based on where you're at, but not always. But I always think that we need someone, a mentor or someone to help us if we want to continue to grow. If you're like, okay, I'm done, I've reached the mountaintop, there's not another mountain, I'm just good, then that's fine. But the true I think,
let me help you with that. Let's say it's not saying you don't need the Upanishads.
Oh, okay.
It's saying you don't need them forever. You do need them in the beginning because it is the higher knowledge. Mm-hmm. And we're steeped in lower knowledge. Mm-hmm. And lower knowledge simply means that we're buying into the senses. We're thinking the reality is what we are experiencing through our senses, what we see, hear, touch, taste, mm-hmm. all that. And the Upanishads are saying that's not the reality. It appears to be mm-hmm. the reality. The absolute reality is that you are the self, that you are consciousness. So in the beginning, you do need the Upanishads because it is the higher knowledge of the true absolute reality. And it requires that retraining of your mind mm-hmm. to let go of that attachment that we have to this external reality.
But there's a difference between reading books and actually putting it to work and having someone also guiding you. Let's say the ultimate aim is for you to embody that truth. Mm-hmm. Then you become the living word for others. Mm-hmm.
right? You're the living example. And ultimately then, once you don't need that, the scriptures or the gurus or the teachers, then you become the teacher.
You become the guru.
Yes, you become the guru, so you can free other people's minds.
But I want to distinguish that once you're done with the text, reading text alone, you need someone to help you, because your ego can interpret the text in different ways, and so someone who has a more direct experience. I mean, you want to meditate on it, you want to look, but there's a reason why all the swamis had gurus of their own. I mean, they didn't say I could do it myself. So could you elaborate on the question, why act at all? You said something about being free from conditioning. I just need help understanding that. So conditioning is the suffering of life. It's that duality of positive or negative, lack and abundance. And so we get, early in life, we get conditioned to go toward pleasure and away from pain. If we're acting purely toward pleasure only, we are caught up in that attachment, and we're not really free, because we're only getting that positive because we are escaping the negative. And so and then I'll let you elaborate on it too. So what we're doing is letting go of the positive or negative. Is it good or bad? This result. And that actually frees us. If it's good, if we're only feeling good when we get good results, and bad when we get bad results, we're caught up in that. That external has so much power over our own feelings, our own emotions, our own life, and our own joy. And by non-attachment, we get to have joy regardless of what shows up.
Yeah.
We get to that. It's more of not a happy joy, but more of a pure bliss kind of experience. So you're free of that duality.
Yeah, it's a great question. It goes deeper than that too. It goes into this idea that we cannot not act. Mm-hmm. Like, you can try it. You can actually verify this. You cannot sit still without any action at all. And action in the Upanishads is also a thought, right? Because thinking is like we're imagining the action, we're running through it in our head, and there's actual movement and action going on in our mind brain. So action is never off the table. In other words, it's a condition of being alive, of having a body. You cannot not act.
Even if you can't move your body, your mind is spinning.
Yes.
And even in a coma, they say the brain waves are still, people are still, it's active. There's something going on.
Right. So if we can't take it off the table, if we can't take action off the table, then we have to ask the next question, what action should I take? Mm-hmm. And what is the intention of that action?
Why are we taking that action?
And that's where the Upanishads instruct us in a very particular way. It says you're going to continue to do your duty, and your duty is essentially the role that you're playing right now. In other words, you're going to continue to do the task at hand. If you're working, continue to work. If you're raising a family, continue to raise a family. Even
if that act of I want to get out of suffering, like you said, that first level is that, okay, let's start there. Start where you're at. For me, I was lonely and single and wondering why all my friends got married and I'm still alone. That's where I started, and that led me to a longer, meeting this guru over here. But it's it didn't, my intention wasn't self-realization. It was more, get me out of suffering. So wherever you are, that's how you act toward, wouldn't you say?
Yes. So let me just finish this thought then. The action, then, you're going to continue to take action, and whatever the task that you're performing as part of your duties. The only difference is that you're going to drop the attachment to the action.
The result of the action?
To the result of the action. Now, what that does psychologically, it liberates you from the conditioning power of those results. So if you get a positive, you're okay. You're neutral. If you get a negative, you're neutral, because you're not attached to those results. When you're attached to the results, then a positive instructs you or conditions you to repeat
more.
the action
Yeah.
and to want more of that. And the negative conditions you not to want more or not to repeat the action.
This is like addiction.
Very much
driven
like
by the-
addiction, very much so. So what that liberation does, now you start to really have a choice as to how you're going to act in the world. Whereas before, you're acting out of that conditioning.
The conditioning is acting for you, not
It's-
you. You're
it's
not having
manipulating
free
you.
will.
In the Gita, it says you're being moved like a puppet with the strings. Your actions are kind of compelled by your past conditioning. So that freedom really starts to liberate your mind from that conditioning effect. Then you're able to act as a free will.
So we're almost out of time. How do you say, what would be the culmination of everything we talked about today is that we want to, in order to have faith, what we're doing is not having faith in the things out there, but faith in ourselves and who we are as conscious beings, that we can't get it through blind faith, that we just believe what we read or see, or we want to have a direct experience of it. So we want to learn higher knowledge, but then contemplate, listen, meditate on these things, try them out, and even try this idea of non-attachment. Practice just doing something for the sake of doing something and letting go of the attachment, and notice how free you become. So it's really these concepts are so against the grain of how we were conditioned. So that's why it feels so weird and awkward. So when we try it, then we get this other experience of ourselves and another way of being that is free.
Yeah, and just one last thing on the conditioning. You are able to enjoy the fruits of the action, right? Because it doesn't prevent you.
More.
Anytime you take an action, there will be a result. You'll still enjoy it, you still perceive it, but you won't be attached to it. In other words, all we're doing is dropping the attachment so it doesn't have the conditioning effect on us, but we're still able to enjoy those things.
So I have a good tip for people who think this is impossible. Love every result. If you at least start there, you could just love every result. Oh, that didn't work out? Great. That's awesome. That worked out? Great. And so you're kind of neutralizing that duality. And so start with that, loving everything that comes up, embracing it. And I think that's going to give you, that's probably easier for someone than just let go of the positive and the negative. Just make everything like perfect. This is just perfect.
Yeah, the point is we're not numbing ourselves to the
yeah.
beauty and ups and downs of life. We're still participating in them and enjoying them.
But we want to examine like why we're in suffering, or we're not having what we asked for, or why we're in suffering with the doubt and going toward that, and what is that about? And there's so much richness in there, and so much light and insight through that, going inward and asking yourself why, versus, oh, that didn't work out, let me keep going, and taking lots of action externally and not really examining, well, why is this so painful in the first place? Why is it so bad that I don't have this or that?
Yeah, and if I had one piece of advice for people that want to cultivate that faith in themselves and their vision, it's this, that you have to be very clear on this idea. You have to cultivate it. In other words, we all have it.
It's not a switch.
It's given to us, it's given to everyone, but you have to cultivate it. You have to consciously approach it and say, I'm going to make this priority. I'm going to put it at the top of the list. I know I have to pay the rent, I have to work, all that other stuff, but priority is awakening this principle in my mind and working on it.
And a lot of times the vision we have that we want is a mean, not the really result. It's the means in order for us to self-realize. So we have these desires. I mean, the divine gives us these desires to, make the world a better place and help others and do these things. So, but that's not the end result. That's kind of the smaller goal. The big goal is that you get to know who you are. And so you use these smaller human goals or these visions to self-realize. And when you do it that way, it all becomes wonderful, because growth will happen either way. Whether you get what you want or don't in the short term, you're going to grow from it. And that's really the prize. The prize is you. Okay, great questions. Thank you for joining us. We will see you next week for another fabulous episode of Soul Sessions. And don't forget to subscribe. There's a button here on the corner to subscribe to our channel. And also check us out on Spotify and Buzzsprout and all those wonderful iTunes. And again, leave a review. Let us know what you think about it. We'd love to hear some honest reviews, and it helps other people find us as well.
Yeah, thanks for the great questions.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thanks for watching.
Bye-bye.